What's happening, fandoms? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here,
we react to music videos and shows.
Today we're going back to our new Rockstars breakdown series. This one is about Mandalorian season 3, episode 3, The Convert, and I can't wait to see how he breaks this one
and also
apart.
What we missed.
Yeah, because I can't understand why she wouldn't talk about the mythosaur. I can't understand why the Empire would bomb her castle. I don't know why we got
the
like a 45-minute breakdown of a seemingly low-level scientist getting basically murdered. I don't know. I want to hear why this is all happening. So let's do it.
Are you sure he got murdered? Just erased his memory.
I'm pretty sure he's pretty much done. We'll never see him again. We'll find out here.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of The Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 3, Chapter 19, The Convert. But who is the convert of this episode?
That's what we said.
The Children of the Watch, or the failed conversion of Dr. Pershing, aka the somehow
Palpatine returned.
I'm going to break down all the Star Wars Easter eggs and the interesting details in this episode that you missed, because there were a whole bunch of them. And please subscribe to my new channel, The Deep Dive, for even fuller analyses in the titles you love, like my John Wick Deep Dive coming this weekend. Also, if you're going to WonderCon, I'm going to be doing a panel with other New Rockstars hosts on Friday, March 24th at 2:30, room 213 AB. Come hang out with us. We open back in the living waters of the mines of Mandalore as Bo-Katan catches her breath upon seeing the mythosaur last episode, but now only sees eerie stillness. Din Djarin wakes up and notices Grogu pats him with his hand. He might have been using a bit of force healing to resuscitate him. As Mando sits up, Bo-Katan's helmet light scans from side to side, searching that water's surface for any ripple or any air bubble. Bo-Katan says the water wasn't always so deep, but the bombings of the Purge must have triggered seismic activities. So the mythosaur wasn't always down here, but the thought-to-be extinct creatures were merely dormant, and the Night of a Thousand Tears cracked the caves enough to clear a path for the mythosaur to swim up. But Bo-Katan does not tell Din about that mythosaur, either out of disbelief or out of distrust of Din, as she wants to keep this secret to herself. Perhaps one day prove herself by riding this mythosaur. As pointed out at the end of this episode, Bo-Katan leaves her helmet on while piloting back to Kalevala, as if the old ways of Mandalore have been spooked back into her at the sight of the mythosaur. Din says this is the way, Bo-Katan says this is the way, and Grogu says... Yeah, this is definitely him trying to vocalize this is the way. But it sounds like his first steps into babbling might have been inspired by the Enzellans, whom he hugged back on Navarro. When the trouble starts, he too helmets up with the link, but he only does so when Din leaves, because if Din had stayed, he would have felt protected by Papa. They're attacked by TIE interceptors, and Bo-Katan says, I've scugged off a lot of Imperial warlords. Scug is a Zygerian insult in Star Wars, and I think one of those warlords, one of the few who could still even be out there, the one who sent this fleet, is Grand Admiral Thrawn, because he seems surprised later, saying that's a lot of ships for an Imperial warlord. We get a burst of Ludwig Göransson's flute as Favreau works in an Iron Man 2 skydive of Mando from the gauntlet, and I love how Mando waits to ignite his jetpack until after the interceptors have cleared, because if he had hovered too slowly, they would be able to pick him off. Din takes off faster than he would not lose Starfighter. As he ascends beneath him on that landing pad, a second later, an explosion tears through where the N1 just was. He climbs and then tips over, hammerheads to get a clean shot of the interceptor, and then tilts a nose to clear the explosion. And I love that they show the wreckage of the interceptor crashing in the water behind him. It's just such a well-directed dogfight. Bo-Katan tells R5 that she grew up flying these cliffs and immediately scrapes a gauntlet on the cliff wall. 3 TIE bombers bomb the shit out of Bo-Katan's castle. She calls them mud scuffers. Son of a mud scuffer was used by Cara Dune in the season 2 finale. Bo chases them down, and behind her, you can see R5 twisting its dome as if to say, no, don't do it. They zip off in hyperspace, and then we move on to Coruscant. This is the latest in history we've seen it in live action since George Lucas first showed Coruscant in the Return of the Jedi Special Edition during that celebration montage. Now, this new Republic era of Coruscant is colorful and lively compared to the brutalist authoritarian monotones it was in Andor during the Imperial era. A new Republic amnesty officer walks in late, adjusting her uniform and her badge. This is G68, aka Elia Kane, Katie O'Brien, who played Jentora in Ant-Man the Wasp: Quantumania and was last seen as Moff Gideon's communication officer in season 2. Her hasty arrival is a clue that she's not a real fan. She's on a job to scope out Pershing. And her name, Elia Kane, as in a liar, and Kane, or alternate spelling Cain, the brother in Genesis who betrayed Abel. Now, this is the same exact opera house from Revenge of the Sith, where Palpatine told Anakin the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise, which is ironic. Because Elia Kane, I believe, is an agent for Palpatine's immortal legacy. Pershing is the beneficiary of the New Republic Amnesty Program, in which ex-Imperials are given second chances based on the post-World War II Operation Paperclip, in which Nazi scientists like Werner von Braun were welcomed into the US military establishment to help us during the Cold War and win the moon race. Pershing says his research was twisted into something cruel and inhumane at the behest of an individual intent on using cloning technology to secure more power for himself, referring to the genetics research he had been doing in the past 2 seasons on behalf of Moff Gideon on the child Grogu we first saw in Chapter 3 from Season 1. Now, we are now a decade after the Battle of Endor, so it's just interesting that the New Republic would still extend amnesty to imps who served war criminals this late after the war, or fawn over them in their now illegal cloning research at public TED Talks. This just shows how flawed the New Republic is currently and how vulnerable it is to the rise of the First Order. Like, historically, the United States recruited Werner von Braun, but von Braun didn't keep building rockets for, like, rogue Nazi SS officers 10 years after World War II. As Pershing says he now wants to help the New Republic, his hands in the holodisplay behind him nervously fidget. And he says that his original intentions were good, and he tugs his ear. And we cut back to Elia reading it as his poker tell. Him touching his ear is actually a callback from when Cara Dune and Din Djarin took him in the Season 2 finale. Cara shot that Imperial pilot, injuring Pershing's ear. That pilot was bragging about the Empire destroying Alderaan. And so Pershing really is flashing back the whole idea of Imperial cruelty. He tells the story of his mother's heart chunk out of his ear too. Organ cloning. He says he just wanted it for organ transplants, and he credits the Kaminoans for their work. These were the ones who created the army of clones from Jango Fett. In a Bad Batch, one of those Kaminoans is currently in Imperial holding for some secret project that's probably connected to this. But Pershing says rather than one strand, he could combine the best genetic attributes from both donors, which kind of feels like a dig at the Bad Batch because they were the opposite of this, the worst strands, but also sets up the research that will be used by Palpatine's cloners. The whole idea here is probably to use a mix of genetic material with high M count from Grogu and existing samples that Palpatine provided before he died. After this, Pershing tells the fan the first casts rejected the formula almost immediately, perhaps referring to that gooey pre-Snoke strand cast that we saw in the tank in the Navarro base in Season 2. Pershing is mobbed by Coruscant aristocrats, one of whom brags about being a draft dodger and not knowing the difference between the Empire, the Rebels, and the New Republic. This crowd just sounds like eugenics fetishists who now get away with their devil's advocacy because they're now fortunate to live in an open society. Thank you. The taxi droid is actually the same model as Ralph McQuarrie's original concept art for C-3PO. He's voiced by Dylan Forsheen, an assistant editor on the show, and he recommends the Sky Dome Botanical Gardens, which was mentioned in a number of Legends novels, and the Mycest blossoms that he mentions come from the Wookiee planet Kashyyyk that are found in the game Star Wars Galaxies. He mentions an exhibit on hyperdrive technology, which could connect to the Rakatan invaders that Luth and Rael brought up in Andor Episode 4. The Rakatans were also from Legends. They were the ancient inventors of hyperspace technology, but currently, canonically, hyperspace technology was derived from the Purrgil, the hyperspace whales that Grogu just saw 2 episodes ago. The taxi droid also mentions extinct animals like the Mantabog of Malastar. The Mantabog were airborne blanket-shaped animals that smothered their prey. They're actually mentioned in RPG sourcebook, Coruscant, and the Core Worlds. One of the amnesty officers, as he walks up, says, "Poodoo, we don't get promoted." Poodoo, again, meaning bantha fodder. But I just love that we overhear a couple of these ex-Nazis who were given second chances complaining about not getting promoted. When Pershing walks up, M34, G27, and M40 all turn to look at him, but G68 keeps her head down initially because she is expecting him. We see how Pershing has a new amnesty program badge, which looks like an elongated version of the Orbesh A. A for amnesty, and for asshole. They speculate on Moff Gideon, one saying he heard he escaped en route to the War Tribunal, the other saying that was just a cover story. I heard they hooked him up to the Mind Flayer. Now, a Mind Flayer was first mentioned by Cara Dune in Season 1, Chapter 8.
I'm a rebel shock trooper. They'll upload me to a Mind Flayer.
Those aren't real. That was just wartime propaganda.
And this episode shows it was real tech used by the Empire, but now in a lesser form used by the New Republic to lobotomize or Eternal Sunshine or Clockwork Orange someone's dark memories and thoughts out of their minds. But Gideon escaping is the cover story? Why would that be the preferable propaganda, that a war criminal escaped? That would be pretty embarrassing for the New Republic, right? You'd think it would be the opposite, that they would say they lobotomized someone who in actuality escaped. So if they did mind flayer him, I wonder if Elia Kane was behind that plan, and that the New Republic is actually more concerned with being accused of torture than they are worried about being seen as having lax security. Clearly, they just have messed up priorities, and that's why the First Order is going to get them. These guys reminisce on the little things about serving the Empire. You know, the uniforms fit better, the trains ran on time, those yummy yellow travel biscuits, also planetary genocide. G68 says she preferred the red ones. She also eats a red popsicle because she's a psychopath. Pershing reads up on Coruscant, which a voice Wikipedia calls an ecumenopolis, referring to a planet-wide city, saying it's one of many, also referring to Hosnian Prime. It goes on to say, though Coruscant is referred to as the center of our galaxy, it's precisely located at our... and then she gets cut off. But according to the Star Wars galaxy map, while Coruscant is a core world, there's actually a more inner tier called the Deep Core, with planets like Tython, which we also saw in Mando Season 2, and closest to the core, Biss, which is Palpatine's secret throne world. The fact that this recording cuts off here might be a clue that before Exegol and Rise of Skywalker, Palpatine's cloning refuge was actually Biss, and that is where his essence is currently hiding, using Snoke to build up the First Order. Elia leaves a whole crate of yellow Nazi cookies, still wrapped with that Imperial crest in Orabesh EB, maybe for Empire Biscuits, the evilest of the Girl Scout cookies, which is also shortbread. Pershing's supervisor wishes him a happy Bendu Day, which is the 5th and final day of the week. So it's kind of like saying Happy Friday if Friday was followed by another Monday, because there's only like 5 days of their week. Later, they actually say Tongs Days, am I right? So the order of the dates of the week go Prima Day, Syntax Day, Tongs Day, Zell Day, and Bendu Day. Tongs were actually the race that once lived on Coruscant, some of whom fled in Legends continuity to found Mandalore. Meanwhile, Bendu is that large force-sensitive creature from Adelon and Rebels who helped Kanan and Ezra repair their friendship. I love how these archive discs look like the disc that was handed to Leia at the end of Rogue One, so this just would be the hardware that they used to store digital records. The plaza that Pershing and Kane visit is the same part of Coruscant that we saw in Season 2, Episode 14 of Clone Wars, Duchess of Mandalore, where Obi-Wan met up with Satine. The music we hear is actually a carnival version of the March of the Resistance theme. The Magician is a cameo by Dean Cundy, one of the all-time best cinematographers who worked on the Back to the Future trilogy, Apollo 13, couple episodes of the Book of Boba Fett. He shot the Tusken train heist and works on the Mandalorian. His flash cameo here is kind of like his cameo as the 1885 photographer in Back to the Future 3 who snaps Marty and Doc's photo.
That's right.
Be sure to check out my Back to the Future deep dive because that guy did amazing work. Now, it's interesting to watch Kane work Pershing, as Pershing is ready to move on from his cloning research, but it's Kane who waits for him to express the slightest interest and encourages it, like Russian agents corrupting the office workers and FX's the Americans. She uses classic appeals like getting them to question authority, reframing what they're actually doing as trying to help, or just doing a small rebellious act, like touching the peak of Umate, the highest point on Coruscant. Elia says it's the only place on Coruscant where you can see the planet itself, which is her way of satisfying a need to what Pershing said earlier about being overwhelmed by the trillions of people on the planet. A trillion of anything is impossible for someone to fathom, but one 2-story rock as their Everest peak is tangible and literally grounding for him. Elia offers to buy him a Photon Fizzle, which is the green beverage in the vat in Dex's Diner in Coruscant in Attack of the Clones, which first originated in a 1985 episode of Star Wars Droids: The Last Prince. Pershing has to check with this parole officer droid, who's actually voiced by Regina Hermosillo, a set decorator who works on the show. And I like how you can see the very annoyance in Pershing when he has to sit through the repetitive question format. Do you have any anger or resentment? And his cheek
I thought it was somebody like
so when Pershing asks Kane for help, notice the bushes they now sit beside are dying. Hint that this is actually a toxic, manipulative relationship. So this episode shows 2 loops of Pershing's workday routine. The first, he's compliant, not eager to ruffle feathers. After being activated by Kane, he now pushes back against his boss to ask why they have to destroy tech just because it's Imperial. And his boss says, not only do we have the Imperial disposal yards to inventory, we're still decommissioning the Alliance fleet. They are scaling back the Rebel Alliance Navy that we saw in Return of the Jedi, something that we know at this point in history Leia Organa is speaking out against, and she later takes off with her independent fleet that becomes the Resistance. Like all of us oinky oinkies, Pershing snacks on a biscuit from his drawer, showing how he is now eating the forbidden fruit, poisoned apple, from Elia. He's snacking on the bait, and he's hooked. So on the second loop, when his parole droid asks if he feels resentment, he touches his ear. These interviews feel like the Voight Comp test from Blade Runner or Scientology auditing. Really, the questions are designed to provoke an emotional response that can be used against the interviewee. Pershing even kind of looks like Rick Deckard from Blade Runner with that raised trench coat collar. In the metro station, they pass a sign in Orabesh Federal Station, Executive Building Monument Park. The public transit system of Coruscant has zero tolerance policy on its rules and restrictions. Report all violations immediately. On the train, one guy raises his newspaper, reminding me of that moment in The Fugitive when that one L train rider in Chicago folds up the newspaper to see Richard Kimball's face on it. No, this is Star Wars, so I'm obligated to point out all Harrison Ford parallels. In The Fugitive and Blade Runner, he played runners named Richard. And let's not forget these droids, nodding Indiana Jones, tickets please bit in Last Crusade. Only when they're on the train does Kane reveal that they're gonna sneak into that Imperial disposal yard, and she says that's where she got the biscuits and gives them this flirty little nudge. In Spycraft, this is textbook honeypotty. They pass through the more industrial regions of Coruscant where Darth Sidious was known to take
she was
residence during
working
Attack of the
him
Clones, where
hard.
Dune visited him. This is also where we saw Yaddle die in Tales of the Jedi. So if Kane is working working on behalf of Palpatine's loyal forces, she might know her way around here from her youth on Coruscant. The fact that she knew the exact moment to jump and land on that cushy pad tells us that she has taken this route before. They gaze upon the Imperial Star Destroyer looming up from below in frame. Other times in Star Wars, the Star Destroyers always come from above. These rodents scurry about. One gnaws on a corner of a yellow biscuit, suggesting that Kane has literally walked this path before. Or Pershing is like Hansel and Gretel following a trail of cookie crumbs to the place where the witch will throw them in an oven. So what is Kane planning here? She's obviously entrapping Pershing for the New Republic, but also it seems like she wants an exact inventory of what Pershing would need to continue any kind of genetics research, and then to erase him as a possible squealer for what Moff Gideon was really planning, and to remove any trail linked to Palpatine. When Pershing asks her what she wanted to be when she grew up, Kane steps back into the shadows, symbolizing her deceit. I think her loyalty to Palpatine and the Empire actually began at a young age. Outside, they spotlight him with a hovercraft marked in Orabesh Police. They waited to trap him until after leaving the Star Destroyer, so that way he couldn't hide back in the bellows of the ship. The Mon Calamari reintegration officer tells him Mind Flayer won't be that bad, he'll just see some pleasant colors. So in addition to the memory erasing tech from Eternal Sunshine, this also resembles the tortuous brainwashing of 1984, or the treatment that was applied to Alex in A Clockwork Orange. Whereas here they use visions, the Empire in Andor used sound torture. Remember the sounds of Dizonite children screaming? So the Empire was deaf to the billions of voices screaming out in terror, suddenly silence, whereas the New Republic is now blind to the blast of Starkiller Base that nuked Hosnian Prime. Pershing yells at the Mon Calamari, "It was a trap!" And that Mon Calamari just looks around confused. I just appreciate that this Akbar reference is completely lost on him. Now the chill music in the background of this room is the same music that plays in Jabba's palace when C-3PO arrives to deliver Luke's message in Return of the Jedi. I just love how in both cases they use these classic Star Wars themes in this new diegetic form in universe. Watching over this, Kane straightens her uniform once more, as we saw her do in her opening shot of this episode. Like Pershing's ear tug, this is her poker tell. And she munches on a yellow biscuit. Her saying she preferred the red ones was a lie. The Mind Flayer beams go from peaceful blue to evil red. She is frying his memories to erase any evidence of what Moff Gideon was doing in his cloning plot with the child, perhaps to cover the tracks of Snoke and Palpatine in the first order.
Okay, that makes sense now.
Returning to covert from the premiere episode. Paz Vizsla greets them. He's now played and I think voiced too by Tate Fletcher. In the past, he was only physicalized by Fletcher and voiced by Jon Favreau, but I think Tate voices him now too. He asks who this Night Owl is. Bo-Katan, before becoming a Night Owl, actually fought alongside Paz's relative Pre Vizsla for a time on the Death Watch. The armorer tests the water by repeating the opening shot of this season, pouring into the tempening vat to create the same green shimmer, showing that it was the living waters of Mandalore that the armorer uses every time she casts a new piece of Beskar. The armorer says that since they both bathed in the living waters, by creed they are both redeemed. And Bo-Katan truly has not removed her helmet since that moment. Paz Vizsla, though, notice does not congratulate them. And it could be because he suspects an ulterior motive from Bo-Katan. She might be working an angle, because notice how this episode ends with her gaze settling on the Mythosar. As the only real witness to the Mythosar, is that she never told Din Djarin about that. She may actually be intending to infiltrate this cult, to win them over from the inside, and to challenge Paz, challenge the armorer, and most of all, challenge Din Djarin, who currently wields the Darksaber, because she wants the rightful rule of the scattered Mandalorian people. Because if you ever want to rule a group of people, you gotta start with the most extreme diehard true believers drinking that Kool-Aid. Hey, please subscribe to our new channel, The Deep Dive.
You gotta have the Darksaber.
Deep Dive collection at nerdriot.shop, or this Mando-inspired shirt. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at EAVoz, follow New Rockstars, and subscribe to New Rockstars for more analysis of everything you love. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Yep, do that. New Rockstars is amazing. Love their stuff.
Right.
Wow. So that did answer a couple of questions for me. I, for whatever reason, I totally missed the connection of her working for Moff Gideon and how she could be going after the scientist Pershing, Dr. Pershing. I guess his name is Pershing. She could be going after him to kind of tie up loose ends so that he couldn't tell anybody what he was doing for the Empire.
I see.
She was really not interested at all in him doing anything further. She was just trying to figure out a way to get rid of him and to quiet him and erase his memories and stuff. That makes much more sense now to me, because I didn't even remember that guy was in season 1 of The Mandalorian. He was one of the guys that was kidnapping Grogu. Right. Because that was so long ago, I had forgotten. So that makes a lot of sense now. So it looks like the big blue Mandalorian was voiced by Jon Favreau at one point, but isn't anymore.
Right.
So
You're
I was
halfway
so I was
right.
half right. He used to be voiced by Jon
Yeah.
Favreau. So yeah, wow. Did you have anything in
No.
there that you thought was your favorite part, or just
Just flying along
cool?
with the Mandalorian.
Cool. You're here for the ride, huh?
Yeah, I'm here for the ride.
Got it.
Well, thank you again for turning into our channel. Don't forget to give your love and support to
The Mandalorian.
The Mandalorian, and
By
also
watching them on Disney Plus.
yeah,
Hopefully before you watch our reactions.
and also the Rockstar too. So,
Yes.
well, thank you again for all your love and support to our channel. We really appreciate you guys. Thank you again, and
See you in the next video.